bracket up here we need to take off. It's attached to the steering rack. Use a 10mm socket. Take that bracket off. Need to remove that bolt. Take that bolt out and then grab the bracket. You can bend it up a little bit and just slide it off. Slide it off the hoses. There's that bracket. There's a bracket right up here. You're going to use a 10mm socket. Take that nut off. Try not to lose the nut. Take that nut off. Now I'm going to take the wheels off. You don't necessarily need to take the wheels off, but I'll take this cap off. Then grab the cover and just slide it off and out of the way. You can put the cap back on just so you don't drop anything in there. I'm going to take the cap off for the power steering, and we're going to extract the power steering fluid as much as possible, just because otherwise it's just going to drip on the floor. So just get a lot of that out. You can use a fluid extraction pump. If I look down back here, I can see where the power steering hose is and follow it along. It's next to this other hose that comes up to where the power steering reservoir is. And there's a bracket right underneath there. You want to disconnect this hose from that bracket. Just use a prying tool. Just get underneath there. Oops. Just twist, and sometimes that bracket breaks. And that's okay. Not the bracket, there's like a little tie, little wire tie, and that's okay. And then we need to disconnect this bracket over here. There's a 10mm bolt right there. It's pretty much on the front of the engine. I'm going to use a 10mm ratchet wrench. Take that off. And take that bolt out. Now, if you grab the power steering hose, you can see that this bracket is actually loose. It's not attached to the engine anymore. You can just bend it out of the way a little bit, and then we'll take that off more once we get it unattached down below. Now we're going to take this nut out on the power steering gear. Use a 10mm socket. I mean this bolt. We'll take the bolt out. And you want to have a drain bucket underneath because you are going to lose some fluid. It comes out like that. Let's get that in the drain bucket. Let that drain for a little bit. Now use a 22mm socket. Remove the lug nuts. And take the wheel off. On the power steering pump, we're going to take this lower line off. Use a 10mm socket. I'll take the bolt out. And just slide it back. There is an O-ring in there. Oops. So you don't want to lose that O-ring, but you can move that pipe out of the way. And with a pick, I'm just going to grab the O-ring in here, slide that off. Sometimes it'll be attached to the pipe. And if it's still in good shape, you can reuse it. Otherwise, it is a good idea to replace it. Now take a 16mm wrench. We're going to slide it in here, and you're going to get this line right here. It's a little bit tight in there, but you can do it. Loosen that up. Actually, the pump's loosening up, which is not good. In our situation right here, when I go to loosen the line, the top part of the pump is turning with it. That doesn't normally happen, so what I'm going to have to do is take the pump out just so I can hold that and loosen this up. Normally you can loosen this just with a wrench and get that off, and that's no big deal. So I'm going to continue on just taking the pump out so we can get that off. Take these push pins out, just use a trim tool. Pop those out. And you can slide this out of the way. I'm going to take the serpentine belt off, use a belt tensioner tool, loosen up the belt. And just slide it off the power steering pump. That's fine, I don't have to take the belt off completely, just keep it out of the way. Now we're going to take a 15mm socket from underneath the vehicle and a long extension. I'm going to take this bolt out right here. Take that bolt out. Oh, it just dropped. And take this bolt out right here, use a 15mm socket. Slide that out, and then the pump is free. And pull that down a little bit. This is what I had to do to get this nut loose. Use some locking pliers on the bottom nut that goes into the pump, and then just loosen it with the 16mm wrench. So now I can take that off. I can take these locking pliers off. And we can loosen this line up, just like this. Do it by hand. And pop that out. Just slide that out like that. I am just going to tighten the nut on the end of this pump just while it's out like that, so that doesn't happen again. Now I'll just take a 30mm socket, just tighten this down the best I can, keeping the pump from spinning. Now from up top, just get the bracket out of the way, the front of the motor. Should just be able to pull it over the slides. There is a wiring harness, you want to get it behind the wiring harness. It's for a ground wire. Yep, all right, got it past that. And then just slide it up over here. And then you can either pull it down from underneath or just pull it up here on this side, the side that goes into the power steering rack. Might be easier to just pull it down underneath because it is twisted a little. You just have to twist it while you're coming up. And it pulls out just like that. Now we're going to put the O-rings on. For this one in particular, the green one goes on this side. The black one's going to go right here. It may be the other way around for different vehicles. The bigger O-ring goes on this side. And then there's this captive O-ring. This goes on top of the black one. So you can put that on first if you want to. Just like that. This new power steering hose does not have this bracket or this other bracket over here. So we're going to transfer them over. Just use some pliers and just fold these tabs back. And just pry that open. Slide this rubber grommet over. And this is where it goes on this one. And just fold it back down. Just like it was. And while it's down, you can fold those other feet down. That looks good. Now that, you want in that location, something like that. Now move over to this one. There's a rubber piece that goes around here. If you can get a new rubber piece right there, that would be ideal. Get underneath here, pry this up. Just use some pliers. We can pry it open. Now in the same location, put this on the new one. You want it right about there. And just fold this back into place. Now that's in there. I'll just fold this down. Tap it down if you want to with a hammer. Now we'll slide this in the same way it came out. Slide that down there. And the same with this side. Down in position. You want that bracket to go underneath the hose and then also underneath the wiring harness that's over there. Now before we slide this end into the power steering rack, you want to take that bracket. You want to slide that in position because it'll be easier to do now before you put this other line in. And you can kind of do it together. Have it go through that bracket and then install the line. You can lubricate the O-rings with a little bit of transmission fluid. Let's slide that in. There we go, that's all the way down. And the line is in the right spot for the bracket. Fold that down. We can put both of those bolts in at this time. Get this bolt started right here. Before we tighten that down, get the bracket bolt in. Just push down on the bracket so it lines up. And tighten those down. Snug it up. Now you want to thread this end into the power steering pump. It is a little bit easier with the power steering pump being loose, but it's not impossible to get it in like that. But if you can wiggle the power steering pump in the correct location. I did put the front bolt in just so I'm really close to where it should be. You don't want to force the threads, but let me get it in started. Should be able to move the pump around a little bit and get the thread started. So I got the thread started, which is good. I don't want to tighten it completely because I want to put the bolts in for the power steering pump first. Now I can access the back bolt, so I'm going to put that in from here. Put that power steering pump back in place. Let's try to get that to line up. I'm going to lightly tighten this one in the front. Not too tight, just want to get it snug, and tighten the back one up. Now I can tighten this one down. That's good. Now reach down in there. We want to get this bracket attached before we tighten up the nut for this hose. Just take that 10mm bolt, get that lined up in this bracket. Get that on, and you can tighten that down. If you wait till afterwards, it's going to be harder to line this bracket up. And tighten it down. It's good. Now we're going to put this lower tube on, use that O-ring, put that back on, or put a new one on, line that up, and slide that in place. Take the 10mm bolt, get that started, and tighten this down, snug it up. Now those are all on. You can put this bracket back in place. Might have to be moved a little bit. That's good right there. Put the nut on. Get that started and tighten it down. Now if you took the power steering pump off and the belt off, you want to put that back on now. Just slide that in position. Make sure the belt is around all the pulleys correctly. And that looks good. Take the tensioner tool off and put this shield back in place and the push pins. Get those lined up. And put the wheel on. Line that up. Put the nuts on. Now I'm going to torque these lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. And go around again, double check. Now we're going to add the appropriate power steering fluid, which is going to be Deck 6 transmission fluid. You want to add it up to the top. You can have a funnel, and what you want to do is have the front wheels off the ground, turn the wheels back and forth. You can start the vehicle and shut it down a couple times, get the power steering fluid circulating through the system, and you want to keep checking it and just making sure the level is correct. And if there's air bubbles in there, you want to let the vehicle sit, let the air bubbles come out. Again, you might be able to just raise the vehicle off the ground slightly, turn the wheel back and forth a few times. Even starting the vehicle and turning the wheel back and forth, it may get all the air out. If you're having trouble getting the power steering fluid to bleed, you want a funnel that will seal to the top of the reservoir here so that you can have some fluid in there. A good way to do this is also to take this line off and put a cap on the other end. And then you can have the fluid coming out of here, going back into the funnel while you're running the vehicle. That's gonna like almost circulate the fluid correctly, and that'll get all the air bubbles out of the system. You can try that. And then you should be good to go. Adjust the level, and you're all set. And take this cover, slide the oil cap off, slide the cover back on, lock it down, put the oil cap back on.